I'd once mentioned the Mishnah tells us that there were 5 tragedies that took place on a certain day of the year. And we commemorate this day as the most tragic day in Jewish history. It's the 9th of Av. And the first tragedy was, which caused the Jews to wander for 40 years in the desert, that when they had asked to scout out the land, and they sent 12 spies, and 10 of the 12 had come back with ominous reports, and the Jewish people believed the 10 over the 2. They were condemned to wander for 40 years, and anybody between the age of 20 and 60 would die and not go into the land. Then we had the destruction of first and second temple. We had Beitar, which was the last stronghold of the Jews in the Roman time, the Roman era, which literally they slaughtered the Romans, about 1 million Jews. And the last tragedy was that they had plowed under Jerusalem. They attempted to remove any relic, any trace of the Jewish past. And that's the 5th tragedy that took place on the 9th of Av. So there's an obvious question which one could ask. The first 4 tragedies, we understand why they were so tragic. But once everything's destroyed, and now they go and they plow under Jerusalem to try to remove any trace of the past, why is that as tragic, or even could be within the same statement? It has no relevance. I mean, it's not to be compared, but yet it is. Because the Mishnah says the 5th tragedy that was the tragedy. So we had explained the past was that if a person knows from where he comes, he knows where to go. But if a person doesn't even understand who he is, where he comes from, then you're totally confused. It's just a question of time before you totally assimilate and disappear. The Romans understood, as much as we destroy the Jews, if there's any remnant of them, wherever they may be, understanding them, knowing and appreciating their heritage, they're going to rebuild, regroup, and we have the same problem over again. As a result of destroying them and not even allowing a trace of Jewish history, the Jews don't know who they are. And once they don't know who they are, if you don't know from where you come, you don't know where to go. And that was the whole ingenious understanding of the Romans, how they were able to eradicate the Jewish people from history, that there shouldn't be a remnant of what they were. If a person doesn't believe that there's a creator, and you come into this world and you see a world, a magnificent, ingenious world, and you have no idea, and you say it came about by itself, Big Bang, whatever the theory may be, how this existence came about. But if there was not a creator, so the question is, so why do we exist? And there's so many questions, not only questions that we don't even understand what we see, but even the way humanity experiences their lives, some tragic, although they're special people. Other people are truly evil, and they thrive and succeed in their lives. And you find just the opposite. People are evil. They have tragic lives. People who are devoutly righteous succeed. What's the takeaway? The takeaway, there's no rhyme or reason. Total confusion. Total confusion. So you have this world, which seems to be, it's a world of opportunity that everybody could succeed and should succeed, but not everyone does. There's so many pitfalls and so many blind spots, and there's so much fog, and there's so much unknown. You can't even begin scratching at the surface to begin to understand what is it all about. But if you begin with a beginning and you understand that there was a creator and there was a purpose in creation, then we have what to talk about. And as I once said, would it make sense that the creator creates a world, a person develops, and they develop an F-26, and the pilot goes into the cockpit, and he could read the numbers on the dashboard, and he sees the throttle and whatever he sees in there. Would it make sense to develop such a sophisticated aircraft, which has such capability, without having a manual, to be able to read and understand the various aspects of that and how to fly this unbelievable piece of equipment and what you're able to do with it? The developer may be a genius, beyond genius. His capability is phenomenal. But how's the pilot supposed to fly that? Well, he used to fly a Piper, a Cessna, whatever the number may be. Flying this without knowing that manual and being trained and being mentored by a person who understands all the shortcomings and all the unknowns, it's disastrous. Disastrous. You can't get into that. You can't even start to take off. You take off, you'll never land. So therefore, if such a sophisticated aircraft was developed, there's definitely a manual that goes with that aircraft. Would it make sense to say the creator creates a world and he says, figure it out for yourself? We're talking about divine genius. We're talking about, as I just said, if you look at the world and the way people function and the way the world functions, it's totally confusion. But if you read that manual, which deciphers all these complicated enigmas, unsolvable issues, and when you read the codes, and the codes immediately give you an understanding, as we say, I see, said the blind man. All of a sudden, light is shed on everything. There's an allegory from the Chovos HaLevavos, from Duties of the Heart. He writes, he's one of the early commentaries, one of the only Mussar works written by an earlier commentator. He writes, a father, a king, he builds a palace for his son. Palace, one of a kind, with every innovation, every amenity, every thing that will address all the interests of the son. And it's made of the best quality material. And the sconces in the palace, which are supposed to ignite the torches to be able to see where you're going. But the son is not too intelligent. And if father gives him the key to get into the palace, walks through the door, and all the windows are covered. It's pitch black. And the first thing he does, he trips, falls down a step, hits his head, and all of a sudden he feels his head is gushing blood. He starts murmuring under his breath, what did my father give me? This is just a disaster. Walks a little further. He falls down another few steps, breaks his arm. By the end of the day, he has almost every bone in his body is broken. His head is lacerated. He's semi-conscious, and he's crying with pain. So the father hears him crying. He sends his guards, and they light the sconces, and they find the son writhing in pain on the ground. And all of a sudden, the son opens his eyes, and he sees something magnificent. And he realizes he's the cause of his own problem. If he would have just turned on the lights, he would have seen the phenomenal palace that his father built him. There's nothing lacking, no amenity, nothing. Everything was taken into account, every one of his needs. But it's because of the foolishness of the son that he didn't light the sconces, the torches. Therefore, he brought about injury upon himself, nearly costing him his life. So would it make sense? God creates this world, which is a world, there's nothing comparable to this universe, that he shouldn't give you an understanding of how to function and how to thrive and benefit and maximize the privilege and the opportunity which he created and provides for you. Doesn't make any sense. But that doesn't make sense if there's a creator. If there's a developer, if there's a creator, then it doesn't make sense. But if you say it just came about randomly, whatever random means, Big Bang or whatever, it was always here, and there's no one to talk to. What's the hope? What's the vision? Where do we go? You go in endless directions. And at the end of the day, if you look at history and you see all the civilizations through archaeology, and what every one of the civilizations, they went into the dustbins of existence. What was the value? Well, whatever it was, the Iron Age, this age, the Stone Age, what is it all about? Man comes from monkey, and he evolved into a human being. Therefore what? Well, the world is always evolving. Ultimately, there's not enough on this planet to sustain humanity. We're going to exhaust all the elements, and therefore we have to cut back on procreation because there's not enough in this world to sustain all these people. They have a 20-car garage, but they only have one child because if they have too many children, they deplete all the resources of existence. What do you have a 20-car garage? The answer is everybody writes their own script based on the way they want to see it. So the first and foremost, we have to start, you have to believe in a creator. Once we believe in a creator, and if a creator could create this kind of universe, we're talking about that creator is a very intelligent creator, beyond anything you could even fathom. And if he's that intelligent and he has that ability, there is a script somewhere which will tell us exactly how to function within this creation. But we have to look for it. In every analysis, to do a proper analysis, you have to ask questions. And the questions have to be proper questions. And that is the first question. If there is a creator and he did create this world, evidently there's some kind of instruction manual. There's no question. Because it wouldn't make sense, such an ingenious, beyond unfathomable genius would create this world without giving you a script, a manual, a guidebook, how to exactly deal with this existence, whether it's just the human being alone, even if he'd be in a cave. So definitely when he goes out into this world and sees what exists, deserts, lush, fertile areas, oceans, rivers, lakes, wells, all kinds of sources, not to be understood. The answer is he did. He did give a script. This first script was given to Adam. God creates Adam and Eve, gives them a level of intelligence. He endows them with an intelligence that they understand every aspect of existence. They're endowed with almost divine intelligence. And as I mentioned many times, the Midrash tells us Adam had a clarity. He was able to see from one end of the world to the other. Nothing was obscured from him. The reason he was able to name the animals and every species was because he had a depth of understanding of all the aspects of their makeup and their function and their purpose and their value in existence, and the symmetry, how all existence functions as one entity. It's not separate entities. Everything complements and supports everything else. And this was endowed by God. And then he gave him laws that he shouldn't trip up, because those laws are crucial and essential and prerequisites for him to function in the capacity with all the endowment he has. A person can be very capable, but he doesn't realize something is lethal. It's poisonous. And he understands everything, but he doesn't understand that this particular herb is poisonous, lethal. And if he ingests it, he dies. So what's the point of anything? So what's the value of all his capability and all his potential and all his genius? If there's a strong possibility he may take that herb, it's over. So God did forewarn him. He gave him guidelines, the parameters. They're called 7 Noahide laws. 7 Noahide laws. Adam was not permitted to commit murder. He was not permitted to commit adultery, incest. He's not permitted to blaspheme God. He's not permitted to become a pagan and idolater. He's not permitted to eat meat, a limb off a living animal. These are all part of the Noahide laws. It was given. It was transmitted to Adam. Because if he does that, he compromises everything he has. So he has to be instructed what will compromise his spiritual makeup, and he becomes that nearly non-functional person, or he destroys himself totally. like not being aware of that poisonous herb which will take his life. But God did forewarn him. I put you in a paradise, nothing compared to it. Every amenity, trees of the Garden of Eden. But there's one tree, don't eat of that tree. Because that tree has a fruit, which is good, but it has a level of evil that nothing exists at that level of evil as that fruit contains. And if you ingest that fruit, relatively speaking, you don't exist any longer. You cannot compare what you're going to become to what you were. It's like a person, he functions. Initially, he had a mind. He had an Einstein mind, and then he turns into a vegetable. So you say, but you're still alive. At least he's still alive. What's your value? Before, you could have turned the world over 1,000 times, advanced this world, something not to be believed. And now, because you took a certain drug, you turned yourself into a vegetable. So and that is literally, and I'm minimizing the difference between pre and post. What happened to Adam? Pre-sin, post-sin, Adam is the equivalent of less than a vegetable. He's a functioning organism, but that organism has no semblance of comparison to what it was before. He's a limited person, limited relative to speaking what he was before. The world takes on a whole different direction. What he's meant to be, he could no longer be. What he's meant to accomplish, he can no longer accomplish. So the obvious question is, so why doesn't God pull the plug on existence? If he can't be, and the purpose is, like I said many times, if it's good money after bad money, what's the point? It's all futile. It's all wasting our time. But because God knows, and if Adam became disenfranchised, that his capability of advancing spirituality and bringing the world to completion, it's no longer within his capability. And if that is the objective of creation, what's the point? But factually, God did not end the world at that point. He did not. He just took them out of the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve. And we speak about the various generations which follow, 10 generations from Adam to Noah. Again, mankind doesn't learn from its mistakes. The moment they get that infusion of power and success, they become totally intoxicated. As much as you tell them God, God, they said, we speak about the Egel Hazov, the gold, what's that? That's the holy dollar. The holy dollar. The moment you have that sense of success, I am the master of my success. I'm a self-made man. It's I and no one but me. But of course, God helps those who help themselves. That's the credo. But even whoever says that, of course, God could have maybe stopped it, could have put the brakes on it. He has veto power, but he didn't, and therefore I was able to succeed. What do you mean you're able to succeed? It was only due because God wanted you to succeed. And he was involved in every moment of that success. Your intelligence, your insight, what to say, what not to say, why the buyer bought what you wanted to sell. God's part of every aspect of that equation, but that's not the way we internalize it. But why are we so blinded? It all started with this handicap, which became innate and part and parcel of humanity because we ingested that foreign substance called evil, which started with the tree of knowledge. Now, how do you somehow expunge that evil to give us a certain balance, equilibrium, to give us a sense of clarity, to be able to address and take control of our lives? How? What do we do? Evidently, Avraham, but every human being has a choice. Every human being has a choice. There were 10 generations from Noah to Avraham. The world failed again. Avraham comes on the scene, and he has a father, Terach. Terach was a pagan idolater. He was a descendant of one of the sons of Noah. Noah was the father of mankind. He had 3 sons, and Terach descends from his most special son. His name was Shem. And Shem was a devoutly righteous man, but he did not have the ability to impact on the world and to give them an understanding that their behavior ultimately will destroy them. His words fell on deaf ears. All of a sudden, Avraham, a descendant, a grandson of Shem, the son of Terach. Terach is an idolater. He's an idol manufacturer. At the age of 3, Avraham, as they said, he's a precocious kid. He was more than being precocious. He had such questions. He didn't have the answers, but as I said, he was a curious kid. And if you're curious and you ask the right questions, ultimately, it will lead you somewhere. As they say, most people, or many people, they're barking up the wrong tree. They take up on causes. The causes in humanity's mind may be altruistic causes. They fight for things. But in the ultimate sense, it's not the ultimate cause. Avraham took on a cause. And the cause, because he came to a certain level of truth and understanding, the cause he took up was the world should meet the objective of the Creator's purpose, intent, the purpose of creation. He realized that there was a master of this universe. There is a creator. And if there's a creator, there's an objective, there's a purpose of this creation. What is that purpose? Avraham himself, because he came upon that, the Creator endowed him with an understanding of what that purpose was. And therefore, Avraham was able to fulfill the Torah in its entirety, not as a person who was obligated, even before it was given. Avraham wore tefillin. Avraham ate kosher, but he was a Noahide. But through his quest for truth, being associated and attached and cleaved to that truth, God shared with him what it takes to elevate yourself and expunge that evil from yourself. But yet, he was not obligated because he wasn't there yet. Because as an individual, even if he would give them that obligation, where does it go beyond that? His child. The family, the foundation is not sufficiently secure. And until hundreds of years later, it wasn't secure. We had the 3 patriarchs. We had Yaakov being the 3rd most special patriarch. He had 12 sons. Even that was not sufficient. The 12 tribes, the founding fathers of each one of the tribes, they had to undergo a process of expungement, purification. Finally, at Sinai, after spending 210 years in Egypt, leaving 50 days later, we stood at Mount Sinai, and God spoke to us, offered us his Torah, his script, through which is the mechanism to bring this world to perfection. And he offered it to all humanity, all the nations of the world. They turned him down. The Jewish people did not turn him down. Now the question is why? Why did we have that level of clarity and the nations did not have? There's an expression in English, person is born, his father's a phenomenally wealthy person. And they say, he's a lucky person. He's a lucky guy that his father was born before he was. The reason why he has such wealth is just because his father created that wealth. He could have never created that wealth. The reason why the Jews at Sinai were able to unequivocally accept, without question, God's offer was because of who preceded us. Who preceded us? The 3 patriarchs. the sons of Yaakov, the fathers of each one of the tribes. King David in Psalms refers to them as Shiftei Ko. They're the tribes of God. They personified God's presence in this world. They generated a holiness. And because we are their descendants, certain things had to be refined, which took a number of years before they were sufficiently refined that we had a level of control over our lives. And now we're ready to be given the offer to accept this script. Because if we have that script, we have the capacity to fulfill it, then we take control of our lives. And if we have the ability to take control of our lives, then we can address the objective of creation to bring about perfection. That's the scenario. This is what evolved: the first patriarch, the second patriarch, the third patriarch, the sons of Yaakov, and then their children and the families. There's an Orach Chaim HaKodesh, which is a semi-Kabbalistic work and commentary in the Torah. Moshe says to the Jewish people, this is the last days of his life. He says, when God created the 70 root nations of the world, we read about the Tower of Babel, where there were 70 families, they wanted to rebel against God. And they built a tower. And God confused their language and created a confusion. And they started to fight. And ultimately the project disagreed. There couldn't be a consensus. Project came to an end. And this was the beginning of 70 languages, 70 nations. Each one has a different temperament, perspective, a different makeup, emotional, mental makeup. But they're all part of humanity. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, why were there 70 nations? Why did not God destroy the 70 nations who rebelled against him? As he destroyed the members of the generation of the great flood, why did he let these people continue? So Rashi in his commentary cites the Midrash because ultimately the Jewish people were meant to come from one of these 70 nations. And if he would have destroyed them, there'd be no Jewish people. Therefore, he allowed them all to survive. He just dispersed them rather than destroying them, because ultimately, Avraham had to be born from them. But now we have 70 nations, and we read, when Yaakov heard that his son Yosef was alive, who was the viceroy of Egypt, he says, I will go see my son before I pass away. And he picked himself up with his family, and they sojourned to Egypt. How many people were in that family? And Torah makes it a point. B'shivim nefesh yardu avosenu Mitzrayim. There were 70 individuals who had gone to Egypt with Yaakov. Yaakov was the father of those 70 individuals, and they went to Egypt. We have 70 nations, and we have 70 individuals. Why do we have this corresponding number? 70 nations, 70 members in the family. There is a word from the Rebbeinu Bachya, very interesting. The Midrash tells us that the most special of the patriarchs was Yaakov. Why was Yaakov the most special of the patriarchs? The Gemara discusses this. We find Avraham had two sons, Yishmael, which his mother was Hagar. She was an Egyptian princess. And then you had Yitzchak. Yitzchak was the son of Sarah, the matriarch. Okay? One son represented evil. The other son represented righteousness, purity, holiness. And when God said to Avraham, although he had two sons, who is the heir of that spiritual throne? The heir is Yitzchak. Why? Because the Torah says Ki bi Yitzchok yikarecho zara. He says Yitzchok is the one, and then afterwards Yitzchok had two sons. He had twins, Yaakov and Esav. And God says both of Yitzchok's progeny are not the spiritual heirs. It's only one of them. Yaakov is the spiritual heir. That Avraham had a son who was represented the negative. Yitzchak had a son who represented worse than the negative, evil. Esav was evil. Esau is the father of Amalek, who is the nation which is the antithesis, cannot tolerate the existence of a Jewish people. Now, if these two people are so holy, Avraham and Sarah, or Avraham and Yitzchak and Rivka, how could Avraham have such a son like Ishmael? Even though ultimately he repented before he died, but he did a lot of bad things in his lifetime. He murdered, he plundered, he stole, he was despised by all humanity. How does a man of this dimension of greatness and holiness have such a son? Yitzchak, whose father was Avraham, who was the unblemished offering, and Rivka, who was a living angel, his wife, she's the matriarch. She should have a son of this degree, dimension of evil, such as Esav. How's it possible? So the Talmud says, these are all derivatives of the tree of knowledge, that they did not within themselves expunge all that evil element. They still had traces of that evil within them. And this was a manifestation of that evil which they still possessed. And that's why there was Ishmael, and that's the reason why there was an Esav. We find Yaakov did not get married till he was 84 years old. Could you imagine? He was Yaakov Ishtam Yeshivolim. He was a man, he dedicated his life to Torah study. Although it's before the Torah was given. As I said, God had communicated to them all the laws which ultimately will be given, because that was necessary for their spiritual refinement. But the one who brought it to that level where he's ready to be the father of the Jewish people, that was only Yaakov, because he was able to expunge it fully from his system, that evil, that the Jewish people should have this equilibrium, this balance, that they will be able to contend with all the Achilles heels, all the traces of impurity within them. Despite them, they could get control over their lives. Because we still have an evil inclination. It's only due to what Adam had ingested within him. We being descendants of Adam, because we're part of humanity, we have issues, but the issues are not the same issues that the world has on a personal level. Yaakov was able to bring about an effect through his spiritual involvement and dedication, the spirituality all those years, and he only began fathering children when he already was an old man. He was a man in his 80s, because he couldn't even consider doing anything till he felt that he reached a level that he had sufficient purity within himself that the children he would father will have control over their lives, that they'll be able to exercise fully that ability of choice, that despite the temptation, they have the ability to take hold of their lives. We read in Pirkei Avos that Ein lecha ben chorin ela mi she'osik b'talmud Torah. Who is truly a free man? A person who engages in the study of Torah. What do you mean not a free man? We live in a democracy. We're free to do as we want. People say, I'm free to do what I want. You know, I could go to a psychiatrist 5 times a week, even 6 times a week. And I have the ability to pay whatever the fee is. I'm a free man. You're a free man. I don't envy your position. I wouldn't want to change places with you. Well, I can do anything. Yeah, sure. With all the baggage you have, that's doing anything you want. You're saddled with every overwhelming desire. You have no control over your life. So what's the latest restaurant that just opened? We have to go there. We have to travel. Wanderlust. What's this all about? You have peace. Every moment you're controlled by your desires. What dictates your life? You don't dictate your life. Your life dictates what you should be, what you should do, how to utilize your time. What drives you? My desires drive me. You're not a free man. A free man means I could do and I could take control of my life. Despite all of those issues, I'm able to take control and have focus and do what I'm supposed to be doing. So everybody says they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Be a success and enjoy life. Is that what it's all about? What's success? And what's doing what you want to do? Doing what you want to do that's not success. Success is doing what you're supposed to do. Now, what are we supposed to do? Everybody has their idea what they're supposed to do. But as we say, God being the creator, he tells us what we're supposed to do and what success is. Of course, at the end of the day, I'll give you an example. A person goes and he accumulates an unbelievable amount of currency his whole life, and he thinks he's the richest man in the world. And then he realizes that currency he accumulated is all discontinued, is not circulable. It's discontinued currency. So what is it worth? It's worth at best the paper. And you can use it for what? For fuel, to burn it. What's it worth? Everybody believes their lives are successful. Within the realm of material, they may be successful. But in terms of the ultimate objective of what success is, it's not what it's all about. As they said, you missed the boat. So therefore, only Yaakov, due to his own dedication, as he's depicted, he's the man who personified the Torah. Yaakov Ishtam Yosheholim, he was the perfect person who dwelt in the tent of Torah. He was able to expunge all that evil, not all of it, but enough of it, that he was able to father a family with the matriarchs who had that balance to have the control over their lives. The Jewish people have endless more obligation than a Noahide, than a non-Jew. A non-Jew only is bound to the 7 Noahide laws. Why? I always give the example. Somebody once asked me a question many years ago. That the Jews say that we're the chosen people and we're God's treasure, it's an elitist attitude. He doesn't like it. Even to feel that way. All men are created equal. We're all the same. What do you mean? We're special, more special. We're chosen. What about the rest of the world? There are a lot of good people in this world. So I explained to him, it's not a put down on anyone. I said, you have 2 people. You have one person, he's chosen to represent the United States in the Olympics in weightlifting. Is he superior as a person in terms of being able to lift weight over the other person? Definitely. He has a capability, a capacity that a person doesn't have. A person has an IQ and an ability that he could go to MIT. Another person can't even get into a community college. Is that person an elitist, or it's a reality has a greater capacity, a greater capability than the other person? There are various categorizations within existence. The Jewish people, because of who we are, we have a greater capacity than any other nation in the world. That capacity is a spiritual capacity. It's a capacity which has relevance to God. And that's a reality. A reality is not elitist. It's a fact. The other people may process this as elitism. And you, because you don't understand who you are, although you are a Jew, therefore that's the way you process it. But if you understand that certain people could do numbers in a moment without a computer, because that's what kind of mind they have. Is he an elitist, or he has a superior type of mind that he's able to process and see things clearly and understand exactly how to implement certain innovations because of his capacity? Because of what Yaakov had done and dedicated his life. Today we deal with all types of engineering. Today, they're able, if there's a genetic defect in a certain line, they're coming up, they're able to actually to correct or minimize that defect, that the generations that are going to be born aren't going to be, that gene will not manifest itself. Since the gene, what Yaakov did, he took that extremely defective gene, which became damaged due to the evil that was ingested by Adam, and he corrected it. He rehabilitated it. Not fully. It still has certain deficiencies. It could actually revert back to that level of evil because of what it was originally. But if a Jew maintains a certain lifestyle, which means living by God's script, then you keep it at bay. Not only keep it at bay, you have an ability of choosing and acting in many other arenas, which the average human being cannot act and cannot function. It's a whole different reality. Therefore, we were given 248 positive commandments. The non-Jew can't deal with that because he doesn't have enough control over his life that he can be committed to that. The 365 negative commandments, the non-Jew does not have sufficient capacity to be able to control himself because he has all these inclinations which are uncontendable, can't deal with it. I'll give you an example. Person, God forbid, is an addict. Person is an alcoholic. He understands he cannot be within the proximity of liquor, of alcohol. Otherwise, he can't control himself. Person is not an addict. He could actually own a liquor store without a problem. He has an inventory that he could get the whole country drunk. That's the inventory, but he has no problem because he's not addicted to it. The world is addicted to many things due to the tree of knowledge. Therefore, all the negative commandments that were given to the Jews, they can't be given to the non-Jew because he doesn't have the capacity to take control of his life, not to be drawn in to cross all those lines. The Jew, because of the level of purification which came about due to the patriarchs, we have that ability that we can control ourselves. Therefore, we were given the 365, we were given that more special soul at Sinai. There was a metamorphosis at Sinai. The Jew was endowed with another soul at Sinai. Initially, he had a soul which was a Noahide soul. At Sinai, it expanded to another level. It was a different dimension. It's like, you have a tadpole, and then you see a frog. Could you believe the frog originally was a tadpole? It's like a metamorphosis. Goes from the tadpole, turns into a frog. The Jewish soul in potential had that potential to become that, if they met all the various criteria and prerequisites. And they did. And we accepted unequivocally. All of a sudden, our souls expanded into something which there was no relevance to the original soul. And therefore, now we can contend with all these various levels to maintain the perfection of that soul, not to diminish it and to advance it. The positive commands are advancement. The negative are diminishments. But it wouldn't be fair to give the non-Jew, whose soul has no relevance to this, he doesn't have that level of spiritualization that he has any relevance to those negative commandments. But what's the objective? The objective today is no different than the objective was when he created Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. To advance ourselves, to bring about perfection. Now, how do you bring about perfection? The only one who knows how to bring about perfection is the Creator himself. It's not something we can figure out ourselves. And he says, if you want to achieve spiritual perfection, which will touch upon every aspect of this existence, will meet my standard, that I'm able to have a relationship with you and you could cleave to me fully for all eternity, this is the way to do it. This is a script you have to follow. And you're able to achieve that, then you've succeeded. And that's what life's all about. So the objective today is no different than the objective from the first moment of creation. We just have to follow the script. You have to toe the line. It's a tug of war. Life is continuously a very serious tug of war. We're an all-front battle. The inclination hounds us every moment of our existence, but we have the means to deal with all that. And there's a lot of slippage, but as much as there's slippage, we go forward. And we can never be discouraged because God is always there to assist us. You just have to have a slight degree of interest. Because it would not be fair to say that we are vulnerable to many problems and God knows it, so we're all victims. We're all victims, God forbid, of God's scheme. But that's not it. It's not God's scheme. God continuously is providing, you just have to notice it. And if you want to notice it, you do notice it. And you see opportunity. Certain people see opportunity and take advantage of opportunity. Many people, because they're distracted with their own minutia of life, they miss it. And by the time they wake up, it's too late. But in regard to what spirituality, it's never too late. It's always available. And God is always communicating at some level. You just have to pay attention. And that's what life's all about. So he explains that initially, when God created Adam, he had a pure soul, pure. And there was this evil outside of him. What was the objective? This is the Ramchal writes also, Rabbi Luzzatto. He was created, he was 99.99% away from perfection. He was so close. If he would have chosen not to eat of the tree of knowledge, he would have hit the 100% mark. If he would have elevated himself to that level, he would have been the eternal person forever. And all the generations would be forever. There'd be no sin, there'd be no evil. Unfortunately, what did he do? He ingested that evil. And God classified as evil. So where is he now? Firstly, he took himself down. You're not 99.99 any longer. Now you've maybe dropped to near zero in terms of what you were. Now you have to work your way up. But now when you're working your way up with a certain degree of baggage, which God says, that baggage I can't be associated with. Because now evil has become an integral component of the human being. And that will not allow you to be qualified to address the objective of creation to bring perfection. Adam was no longer, but every nation had a chance. And they had the ability to expunge it sufficiently to recreate the balance. There was only one person who started the process. That was Avraham. At the age of 3, despite the vacuum in existence of spirituality, he recognized it. He started that dynamic, followed with Yitzchak, culminating with Yaakov. He created that pure soul, he refers to as the pure tree. Until then, all the souls that were born to existence were seriously tainted with the evil of the tree of knowledge. Yaakov was able to perfect himself to the point that his soul reached a level of purity that it no longer has that impurity, the degree of impurity of the tree of knowledge. I'm quoting the Orach Chaim's words. We are still subject to temptation because we still have traces of that within us. But in terms of being able to take control of our lives, we have control. But we just have to live by the script, because if you don't live by the script, as the world could go off the cliff, we could also go off the cliff. No less than that. Therefore, we have to live within the confines of the Torah itself. I once mentioned, we have mnemonics to have an understanding of what certain facts. The 365 negative commandments, what are they? 365, that'd be 365 days in the solar calendar. What does 365? And the Midrash tells us this. It corresponds to the days of the year. The solar calendar. The rotation of the earth is a 365-day rotation. So the Maral of Prague, as I explained, says, it's much more than a mnemonic. 365 is much more than a mnemonic. To remember how many negative commandments there are. But rather, just as 365 regarding the rotation of the earth, that is the order of existence. To maintain your order of spirituality, that it should not be diminished, you must live within the context of not crossing those 365 lines. That is the order. That's how you maintain order. We're not speaking about advancement. You want to maintain your order, this is what you must do. 365. You want to advance yourself, the 248 positive commandments, that's advancement. But one thing the Jew has to understand, there is a certain mechanism. We're not perfect. We all ultimately fail multiple times. Some more often, some less often, but nobody's perfect. And because God knows we're not perfect, he gave us this mechanism called tshuva, repentance. And if you employ it, regardless of to what degree you failed, or your descendant, you're able to ascend again. I'll give you an example. Person falls into a pit, 10-foot pit, can't climb out of the pit. So you lower a rope, which is, let's say, 15 feet long. He could wrap it around his arms, and you're able to pull him out. What about if he falls into a 100-foot pit, and the rope is only 15 feet long? That rope, you can't extend it to that person to pull him out. But God says, you know something? This rope can extend itself as far as a person may fall. There's always that safety line that can be lowered, and you, as long as you grab hold of it, I will pull you out of it. I'll pull you out of that morass. And as you come up, whatever you experience down at that abyss, whatever it was, as you come up, gradually, you're going to be rehabilitated. You're in this cave and you have black lung. As I pull you up, you'll come through environments which will rehabilitate your lungs. And you'll have healthy oxygen in your blood to regenerate and reinvigorate yourselves. And all the blockages in your heart, they will be cleaned and cleansed, that you'll have a blood flow sustaining all your arteries and all your limbs to function perfectly. That's the mechanism. That's the gift to humanity. Because factually speaking, every man has that choice to go off the cliff. Because you're given that choice, because that only gives value to the positive choice. If one's limited, so that doing the right doesn't have as much value, because how wrong could have you done? But if God gives the option to go to the nth degree in the negative, and you could have done that, and you chose not to, and you chose to go in the positive, that gives the positive much greater value. And even if the person did choose to go take the negative direction, God says you can always come back. And then the accomplishment is phenomenal. Why? Because the Talmud tells us where a Baal Tshuva stands, a person who's a tzaddik all his life doesn't stand. In order means to come back from the abyss, despite the person is below, he barely has a nuance of a pulse, and all of a sudden, with all his might, he's able to somehow do something that the ambulance corps or the hospital picks up that nuance of sound, and they immediately go and they do triage on him, and they revive him, bring him back to life. Nobody's ever totally a corpse when it comes to spirituality. There's always that little flicker of spark of holiness within the soul, and it can always be reignited, no matter what. The Jews in Egypt were pagans. All of them were pagans, except for the tribe of Levi and a handful of other people. After the year of the 10 plagues, what happened? 50 days after leaving Egypt, where were they? They were saying, we accept your will unequivocally. It's not to be believed. They were spiritually comatose a year earlier. Now, not only are they not comatose, they've gone beyond the level of an angel. They've ascended beyond the level of the greatest angel. Is it to be believed? What does that say? That says, no matter where you're at, you should never give up and not despair. God will always take you back. It will give you the ability to come back. Now you say you give a person a one-way ticket to go to who knows where. And you say, you know something? You could always come back. They said, but how am I supposed to come back? You gave me a one-way ticket. God always gives you a round-trip ticket. You could go one way, but he always allows you to come back. Always. Guaranteed. As they said, rain, shine, snow, or sleet. You can always come back. The airlines never cancel the flights back. You're always coming back. That's the way it is, and that's the reality. Okay, we're going to stop here today and to continue tomorrow with this at 12 o'clock. Everybody should have a good day. We have the Daf Yomi today at 11 o'clock, 11 to 12. Everybody have a good day and be well.